Generation Z has other plans. Yeah, I bet you do. Actually, this article talks about something else than what I want to talk about, but still. There's been like several different videos and TikToks of people, specifically Gen Z young people, complaining about, well, work. And naturally, I've also seen a lot of articles writing about this because apparently it is not allowed to complain as a young person these days. Well, when has it ever really been allowed to complain as a young person, to be fair, right? Well, I've been reading this and I'm like, oh, well, I really wish I would have worked with some Gen Zers because I would really like to know how they're actually working. And well, I'm maybe sort of kind of one of them. Like, I'm born in 96, I'm technically a millennial, I guess. But in this like generational bracket, I've always felt kind of like in between millennials and Gen Z, if that makes any sense, because like I very much relate with the office politics of the Gen Z. And so yeah, I was wondering, how is it actually working with Gen Z? And you know what? I have worked with Gen Z. I have worked with younger people than me, and I can tell you the most hardworking people that I've met so far, to be honest. Honestly, probably harder working than older generations in my experience, and they don't complain about work the same way. I feel like with older generations, it's usually like a specific person that they're focused more on, like a coworker they don't like or a boss or whatever, whereas Gen Z just generally complains about life, I guess. I feel like Gen Z complains more about like society and workplaces just generally not being particularly accommodating. And I think that's very fair because at this point they're not. I mean, if you look at this kind of article, right? Survey shows dream of wealth through work has burst for many. The mood among German workers is truly bleak. The majority no longer believe in long-term prosperity through work, and the gap between life goals and affordability is widening. It's kind of showcasing that the middle class is kind of disappearing and you cannot get to this like comfortable mediocre average lifestyle anymore of like having a family and affording a house and whatnot. Wage frustration and constant stress. Young generation loses trust in the job market. I mean, who wouldn't? In South Korea, hundreds of thousands of young people are voluntarily withdrawing from the job market. Low pay, rigid hierarchies, and a merciless education system have worn them down, but the country faces a growing economic problem. So that's South Korea now, that's not even Germany. Fantastic, right? It's really bleak, but like I agree, my experience with the job market is pretty much the same, to be honest. Being an employee isn't fun these days, okay? And I think the older generation that criticizes young people the most are still the boomers. They have criticized us millennials as well, and the generation before us too. They just hate everyone who's younger than them, I guess. But the boomers basically grew up at the time where it was possible for them to get a mediocre job and be able to afford a goddamn house with that. We just don't have that luxury anymore. And yes, as a result, we're demanding more for these jobs. We want more fairness, we want more work-life balance, we want to work less for the same salary. Duh. Because essentially, the value of that job, the value of the salary that you used to get is now much lower. We can afford less things with the same salary that boomers used to have, basically. When it was possible for them to afford a house, well, now for us it's maybe we can afford a quarter of it, if at all. So naturally we want more, like we want that balance back. And I think it's then very interesting to read articles like this one. Generations researcher. I see how unreflective some young people are. I mean, like, instantly my thought is, what do you expect? They're young people. 10 years ago, I was definitely not reflective as I am now. I also definitely didn't have the 10 years of experience that I do have now that I can actually reflect on. Like, now I have some work experience and I can actually compare it, right? I can say this place was really crap, this one was worse, and the third one maybe actually was a bit better, and I can say which parts were good, which parts are worse, and what am I looking for as an employee in the future. I didn't have that experience 10 years ago. I didn't really know what to expect as an employee. He's basically criticizing this young influencer, Julian Kamp, who made a TikTok video where he complained about working a 9 to 5 job. There was definitely a little bit of a misunderstanding because this researcher assumed that this young man is working as an influencer 9 to 5, but that's not actually the case. He took on a normal job, an office job, I think, which he was then working 9 to 5, and he was complaining about this because, well, let's be real, working 5 days a week for kind of not the best salary in the world and having to deal with all the issues that come with this job, and also, having this little time for yourself, it's not really that much fun. Like, I know damn well I have my issues with a 9 to 5, and I'm not even Gen Z. I don't like giving away 5 days of my week to a job that I barely even tolerate. And I wasn't trying to be an influencer on the side either, which he is. He's already doing more work than I did. He's already doing more work than any of the generations before us did, because we didn't have social media growing up. We didn't have the potential of being an influencer. We also didn't really have the expectation to be one, to be chronically online. His generation is already under much more pressure than any of us before, just even socially, because you're almost expected to be on social media, you're expected to be online, you're expected to voice your opinions, and you're expected to also be able to handle them gracefully. He's 25. Like, you're expecting so much from these young people. Like, us millennials already kind of struggled with this issue that we were expected as employees to be like 18 with 10 years of experience and also take minimum wage. But holy shit, what are you expecting of this generation? He does also point out in this article that it's different for young people today, right? Like, it was maybe more difficult back in the days to find a job, but it is much easier now. We did make it a lot easier. We did make jobs a lot more accessible, workplaces a lot more accessible. We have work from home. Also, we did, or older generations raised younger generations in a way that they expect more of those comfortable things. But that's the point. That's what the older generations always have done for the younger ones, right? So why are you complaining about the younger generations being too comfortable if you made it that comfortable for them in the first place? You're not allowed to complain about young people complaining when you created this world. I agree, younger people are in a way too comfortable these days. Like, they have these expectations for the workplaces to be super accommodating and have great work-life balance and whatnot, and that's just not the case for most of us, to be honest. That's not the case for most workplaces. But I think this article says it best. Labor market study shows Gen Z is simply saying what many employees are thinking. Again, coming from my own experience as well, I absolutely agree, because I think the job market is really shitty. I think it is still really difficult to find a job, even if it's technically supposed to be easier, right? Like, we all have better education and more degrees and whatnot, but if everybody becomes educated, then that becomes the new average. So now everybody's the same again. So it's more difficult to find that job that you're looking for, and it's even more difficult to find that comfort that you're looking for in the accommodation, because not every employer offers that. Most employers just don't care. 2 recent reports reveal the state of the working world in Germany. The findings are sobering. They show what burdens employees today, what wears them down, and where the labor market is reaching its limits. In many companies, a significant gap is opening up between aspiration and reality. While employers present themselves with concepts of new work benefits and brand promises, employees report increasing stress, decreasing sense of direction, and declining satisfaction. The communicated guiding principles clash noticeably with everyday reality, and the discrepancy is widening. Coming from hospitality, I agree with this even more, because I think this industry is even more susceptible to these issues. The world economics are in general not really fantastic right now, because consumerism isn't really that great at the moment. So companies are not making as much money, so they need to save. And where do they save first? Usually it's the employees, right? And hospitality, at least here in Switzerland, is most affected by this, because employees here are basically the biggest cost of a company. And that's a particularly big issue in hospitality here because, well, your employees are your commodity, right? They are what makes you money essentially as a company. If you fire an employee, you do cut employee costs, but you're also leaving more work for the remaining employees, which means more stress and more burnout for them, which worsens service, which guests usually notice. So apart from those people that can't come in because they can't afford it, you also now have people not coming in anymore because they don't like the service. Cutting employee costs in hospitality, here in Switzerland anyway, is really a lose-lose situation, but it's also really incredibly difficult to find balance. And that's just hospitality. I mean, that's nothing new, really. Anytime the economy goes bad, companies try to save money, and they usually try to save money by cutting employees. So whenever you have less employees, you suddenly have more workload for the people that are remaining. And it is a really bad time right now for young people to enter the job market, honestly. Like, I wouldn't want to enter into this reality. Like, obviously, it's not going to be that easy anymore now to climb up the career ladder. Like, it's not particularly easy to begin with. And it's also extremely bleak if you consider that it probably doesn't even matter. I had a discussion with my dad the other day that was kind of going in this direction, and we were actually talking about AHV, which is basically the retirement money here in Switzerland. And he explained to me what you would need to get the full AHV when you retire, which I was like, so you need this average, which is actually really difficult to achieve, to be honest. And if you have like a mediocre life, which sounds bad, but it's reality for most people, right? You're gonna have a basic life with a basic job and a basic salary. You're never gonna reach even those 90,000, so you're never even gonna get this full retirement money. But just the fact that even this one pillar that is supposed to cover our basic needs is not enough to actually do so in the first place, but then you're also really unlikely to reach that. It just, like, even me, it makes me not want to participate in any of this. Like, why should I, as a young person, get a job and work hard if realistically I'm hardly even gonna reach that average to get like the full retirement pay at the end? And even if I do get that retirement fund at the end, it's probably not gonna pay my bills. And the question even remains if we're gonna even have this system in the first place by the time I'm retired. Why should I participate in any of that, you know? I can see why Gen Z doesn't want to do that. So if we can't have this, right, if I'm unlikely to have a comfortable retirement anyway without depending on the government, and I'm also unlikely to ever be really able to afford a house, then why should I slave away at a job that I don't like? Like, at this point, even my millennial ass is looking for more work-life balance, right? I'm looking for a part-time job, I'm looking for something like 4-day week. And you know, this is why I relate with Gen Z so much, because I've always had an issue myself with slaving away, giving away my time for a job that is not gonna pay for a house. Like, okay, of course, a house is not the most important thing in life, but it does offer security. And if I have a job that is not paying me enough to feel secure, then why should I slave away for that? You know, might as well just depend on the government. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm on here on social media because of this, because I want a different reality for myself, because I don't want to depend on the government, and because I also don't want to sell my hours and, well, essentially my body to a company that doesn't even appreciate me. If my employer thinks that I'm replaceable, then I don't want to work there. It's very simple. And there's not a whole lot of companies that actually don't think that. I cried a lot after work. How Generation Z is despairing over their jobs. The documentary follows 3 young employees of Generation Z in their jobs. They are all dissatisfied with their situation and are striving for change. Like, I think this is probably the worst one. Like, this is so sad. This is so sad, and it's true for me as well. Like, I've had jobs before where I was crying afterwards because it's so bleak. Like, it's so hard to look into the future and be like, yeah, it's gonna be good, because all you're thinking, like, I'm gonna have this job for the next 40 years. Or if it's not that job, then it's gonna be some other job that I really fucking hate. And it's just not satisfying. It's not satisfying. Even if you pick the job that you really enjoy, it's just not fun thinking about how you're gonna slave away for the next 40 years. For what? For what? That's the question. That's the thing. At least like older generations, they were slaving away for like a house and a car and a family, and it's just like unattainable at this point. And now it's like we're slaving away to retire afterwards, but into retirement where we still can't afford anything. Like, this is actually making me sad right now. Because yeah, I've had jobs where I've cried afterwards. I had jobs that I cried before work. Um, in the past 10 years, it hasn't really gotten any better. It's still bleak. It's probably even worse now. And then, older generations tell us that it's easier for us now these days, but here we go. Why it's so hard for Gen Z to find a job right now? None of us are really thriving. And I agree, it's really difficult to find anything. I'm not even Gen Z. Or maybe I am. I don't know. I honestly don't really understand the generation brackets. It's really difficult to find a job these days. Like, I've been on the search for a year. Why is it so hard to find a job at the moment? But imagine somebody coming in with no experience, just a degree. It's just not enough. Like, it was already for us this expectation to have 10 years of experience with just having finished studying, which is obviously completely unrealistic, but it's even worse now. Like, a degree is just not enough. You need a master's at this point because you need to be outstanding, right? Because being just a normal ass person is not enough these days. You need to be special. And you also need to accept minimum wage. He's really making me mad. Here's one. Reckoning why Generation Z lacks performance and respect. I think that's such a rude thing to say. I don't think they're lacking respect, but I think they're demanding it because humans deserve basic respect. And I've had employers tell me after I've worked with them for a while that I need to earn respect, which is like, I'm gone, bye. Yeah, that just doesn't slide anymore, like that is not acceptable anymore. I'm honestly so proud of Gen Z for demanding just basic respect. You have a reason to complain. You're right to do so. You can actually change things by complaining and by not accepting the status quo. So keep doing that. That's definitely not all of my thoughts, but those are all the thoughts that I can think of right now. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Is Gen Z lazy or are they hardworking? What has been your experience if you've worked with any of them? Let me know. I would be really curious to know. And leave me a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Hard work, education, and career success haven't brought many the security they hoped for. Speaking to the US magazine Newsweek, she said that millennials played by the rules but now face rising costs and a lack of fulfillment. Because you don't play the game. Don't fucking play the game. Where would we be without the major changes that the boomers... Y'all, we probably would have affordable housing.